Thank you so much for joining us, Karsh. Truly a pleasure having you on ET Now and Brand Equity.
Great, thank you for having me.
So, Karsh, really want to go back in time, restart your journey. So, if you could flash back and tell me about, your background. How did you manage to, break into the music circuit?
Well, I started playing music when I was 3-4 years old. So I knew since I was a child that I wanted to play music. Didn't really know what that meant in terms of a profession, but I was always exploring music. So I was playing tabla, I was playing drums, I was playing cello in school. So I was, I kind of trying all kinds of different things. And then when it was time to go to college, I went to NYU. And when I arrived in New York City was really, I think, where I started to kind of design the sound of what it was that I wanted to create myself.
Right.
Besides just playing with other different musicians.
Sure, sure.
And New York being the kind of place that it's very fertile ground for new ideas.
Right.
And I was surrounded by very inspiring artists who were doing stuff that I'd never seen before, never heard before, stuff you wouldn't hear on the radio or you'd never see on television, things that were 10 years ahead of its time.
Wow.
So that was the greatest, I think for me, that was the place where I was, that was where, as an artist, I was really born there in New York City.
Right. So, would it be accurate to say you took about 7 to 8 years before you actually, made it big and were recognized as, a serious musician?
Probably took a little bit longer, actually. It wasn't really until 2000 where I finally struck a record deal in America. That was for about 4 years I was sending demos of my own compositions out to different record labels. And at that time, both the electronic music scene and the world music scene were kind of starting to become a little bit more mainstream in the States.
Right.
And I kind of was I was there at the right time.
Right.
To kind of ride that wave. So I signed a record deal with 6 Degrees Records, and right at that same time I started working with an artist named Bill Laswell, who started a project called Tabla Beat Science.
Wow. Which
all of a sudden put me in the same band with my idol, who's Ustad Zakir Hussain.
Of course.
And that was for about 4 years I got to perform with them, but the first show we did was right upon the launch of my first album. It was in front of 17,000 people in San Francisco, and for me, I never really had a guru growing up, so that was my moment when Zakir Bhai and Sultan Khan Sab gave me my blessing, gave me their blessing, and kind of sent me on my way and said, exactly what you're doing, continue to do that.
Wow, wow. Talking about the music business, so to speak, do you think the way the music economy is currently placed, it is actually conducive for fresh talent or even established talent to actually thrive in the space that they're in?
I think that it's twofold. There's the opportunity nowadays for people to get heard it's much easier. Obviously you can make a track and in your home or record something with your group or with your band and upload it on the many avenues that YouTube or SoundCloud and things like that, and people will hear it. What it's done to the industry is that there's no money in the industry because music has become a free commodity now.
Exactly.
So everybody, and this whole generation, you can't change their minds now. They've grown up getting music for free, like getting catalogs of music for free, where we used to save up our money and wait until Friday to go to the record store and buy that one album that we were waiting for. So yeah, I think that's changed, and I think the whole business model needs to kind of reinvent itself now. And it can. I mean, I think television has reinvented itself, film is kind of reinventing itself, and music hopefully will follow suit.
Right. But when you say that it's all practically free, which is true, like nobody really pays for music, what does that mean for people like you?
Well, I have to say that my career probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the fact that people got music for free. I came up in a time when, my music came out, but maybe the first 2 records were actually in record shops, and then iTunes came out.
Right.
And everything went digital. My album actually was one of the first independent records it was the first independent record on iTunes.
Wow.
They had 8 albums that they were advertising, and mine was one of them. So it was very exciting to be a part of that whole thing. But I realize now that my fan base, because you don't see, it used to be you could see you know, you could look at the numbers and say, oh, I've sold this much in Germany, I've sold this much in Korea, I've sold this much in India. Now those numbers don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And they've been replaced by YouTube views and things like that. So what I've realized is that my actual fan base is the generation who got it for free. Who, you know.
Exactly.
So I think now what we focus on the live gigs. I mean, in terms of making a living.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
And it's about the live shows and being able to create that kind of audience where people will come to see a show. You know?
Sure. I want to come back to iTunes and the fact that, you know, now you have an album out and I like a particular song, so I'm really interested in that song. And given the fact that the whole album era is really over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody buys an album anymore. You just buy a track. I mean, you just hear a track or download a track. But you still release albums as a musician. You don't release a song, right? Why is there a dichotomy in what consumers or fans, as you put it, want from you, and you as a musician are delivering?
Well, I think that's always been the case. Mm-hmm. I think that from the record buying public, even in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, maybe only 40% of them actually listen to every song on the album.
But I still had to buy the album.
Yes.
You see, I was forced to buy the album.
Well, no, you could buy the single as well. We used to always get, we would
get
the mini, and we would tape stuff off the radio. We would listen to American Top 40 and find our favorite songs and make our mixtapes and stuff. So we've always been doing that. We've always been making now we have our iPods and we, you know, create the shuffle and, you know, and we listen to stuff back to back, all kinds of different styles. As an artist, it's very frustrating because I still think in terms of albums. I think in terms of telling a story that takes about an hour at least to get through, much like a filmmaker or someone who's writing a book. And then, people only want chapter 3. But I think that's, you know, everybody's going to always have their own interpretation anyway of what the journey, and I've realized that over the years after I've released enough records that whatever I intended the song to mean or the album to mean is just my own interpretation, and people will turn around. It could be a song that I've written after heartbreak, after something really, you know, difficult that I've been through, and somebody comes and says, we used that song at our wedding. You know, and this happens all the time, and you realize that, you know what, music is subjective. People are going to, you know, they might just take a song from your album and it means the world to them. Some people will take a year to actually go back and listen to the whole album.
Right.
You know, and there have been albums that even myself I haven't actually explored until about a year or two after I got the album.
Sure,
you know.
sure. I want to you know, bring you to the Indian scene, and before I go there, really, Karsh, do you think you would have made it to you know, the position you are in today if you were actually starting off in India as a musician?
It would have been difficult.
Yeah.
I've asked myself that question many times and kind of thought about the different roads that I might have taken, and then, you know, I met some of my closest friends, the medieval pundits from Delhi.
Yeah.
Realized that we grew up almost the same way. We grew up with the same influences. You know, they got the music in different ways, but when we sat down for the first time when we met, two guys grew up in Delhi and me growing up in New York, that we arrived at the same place.
Wow.
You know, so I think that I might have, you know, it really depends on the environment. But at the same time, my thirst for being involved in Indian music really came from being isolated from India, being isolated from my culture, being one of the only Indians in my school. You know, this was something that made me thirst for being able to, it was also about explaining who I am to my environment, you know. Otherwise, I was just a foreigner.
Right, right. And what is your take, you know, and your critique really on the Indian music scene today, compared to, let's say, the West? So if you juxtapose the Indian music scene with the West, I know that's a bit unfair, the comparison, but even then, I mean, in the last few years, we have seen a decent improvement. There are festivals, we have more concerts happening, and so yes, there is some kind of traction we're seeing. But even then, if you had to critique it as you know, an industry there which is open to talent, open to listening to new things, and has that concert culture really, do you think you know, we have still a very long way to go?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, there is really no music industry in India. It's a film industry.
Yeah, that's
you know, that sells music.
Yeah.
Otherwise, in terms of independent music, I mean, if you make devotional music, classical music, you know, that's always existed.
Sure.
But for anything new, anything that's out of the box, that's what these festivals and the concerts and you know, these events that are happening around the country, I think that's what they're there for. That's to inspire that scene. And I've seen this kind of thing happen in the States. That this cycle happened many times. What happened after Woodstock in the 60s was a complete revolution of, you know, these were bands that would never have been considered by record labels.
Right.
And then, excuse me, and then all of a sudden, all of them became the biggest bands in the world. You know, and what's happening now in India is festivals like NH7 and Sunburn and things like that. They're exposing huge audiences to artists that they normally wouldn't get access to, not on the radio, not on television, nor on film.
Right.
So this is it's a new avenue.
Right.
The industry has to catch up now. The industry needs to realize that this is real. This is something that's not going away. It's only going to get bigger. It's not going to get smaller.
Right.
Because it's being demanded by the generation. You know.
Sure.
This is not manufactured by the industry itself.
Right. Right. Karsh, do you think it's also a bit ironic, given the fact that, you know, Indian culture and Indian music, if you go back in time, it's actually quite rich, right? And we have some serious quality in our music. But if you look at the kind of music that is being consumed today at large and mass, it's essentially Bollywood masala, right? Which people are tripping on. And somewhere that entire culture that we had is lost in translation. And yeah, so there's some people who are trying to get it back, but that leaning somehow, that music leaning and that heritage that we had once seems to be very, very diluted.
I think that exactly what you're saying is happening all over the world right now. And I mean, in fact, I don't think there's really a Bollywood style of music anymore. There was, and now it's just become pop music that sounds exactly like the pop music that's coming out of Korea and the pop music coming out of America and the pop music. It's all the same.
Why is that?
Well, because of technology. First and foremost, it's because everyone's using the same stuff to make music now.
Oh, okay.
You know, it used to be about the studio. It used to be about the environment. It used to be about the room you're recording in, things that gave music its diversity. And now everything sounds the same because everybody is using Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton Live, and they're whether you're making techno music or you're making, you know, a Katy Perry album or you're doing a Bollywood movie. It's all the same.
Right.
You know, the thing is that what people in India don't put enough emphasis on is the background score, because that's where the real music is happening in films.
Wow.
You know, and whereas in the States, the background score is the music.
Right.
That's
right.
where, you know, when somebody wins an Oscar for the music of a film, it's because they wrote the score.
Sure.
It's not because they wrote a song. Yeah.
Right, right, right. As a musician, how much do you need to focus on really marketing yourself as a brand to become bigger?
I probably should have done that a lot more than I have. You know, I think that I think whenever I've worked with other record labels and things like that, I've always kind of had that conflict, because I don't like to be put in a box. I don't want people to talk about me in terms of genre. That's always been a big thing whenever I'm releasing a record. Is it a rock record, or is it a world music record, or is it an electronic record? You have to choose,
right?
You know,
right.
of where it goes, you know, and things
Tag
like that.
You.
Yeah, and anytime I've ever been tagged, I feel an instinctual need to break that.
Right.
So as soon as somebody says, "Oh, he's a DJ, he's an electronic artist," I'll do 2 classical concerts. You know, and you know, if somebody thinks that I'm only doing Indian music, I'll play a rock concert. You know, or at least infuse that in whatever it is I'm doing next.
Right.
If I'm in the studio writing a song, then that is the direction that it winds up going. Because for me, like I think most people are. I don't think that it's just me. I think that most people don't listen to music in terms of genres. They just listen to music that resonates with them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karsh. This was truly a pleasure and lovely speaking with you.
Great. Thank you for having me.